Well, hello there. How is everybody? I know it's been a minute since I uploaded a video to YouTube, but I've been pretty busy lately and I've had a lot of things on my mind and just haven't really been in the mood, honestly, to upload any videos. But today, I just wanted to upload this video to talk about some things that I've been thinking about lately while the thoughts are still fresh in my mind. So anyhow, I wanted to relate this story that I've been thinking about for several months, but just hadn't gotten around to talking about it. I'll probably break it up into two separate recordings, and at the end of those recordings, you'll understand what I'm getting at. Several months ago, this man that I know was shot and killed. And we're talking about someone who I grew up with. And I knew him very well. But over the years, I would say over the last 15 to 20 or so years of his life, I distanced myself from him because of his lifestyle. He came from a very broken home. Both of his parents were addicted to drugs while he was growing up, and he ended up being raised by his grandparents. Although his grandparents did the best that they could for him, for whatever reasons, he decided to take, I guess you could say, an unsavory way of life. He decided to just live the street and thug life and commit crimes in order to get by. And as far as I know, he never worked an honest job a day in his life. So he did things like sell drugs. All of this that I'm saying is alleged activity. A lot of these things that I'm saying are alleged and hearsay, but there are some things that he did that he was actually caught and arrested for, like burglarizing and robberies and things like that. I heard that he also was involved in selling drugs, and he had gotten into many physical scuffle and confrontation with different people. And he was also beefing with a lot of different people about different things, which I'm not going to get into details about. But anyway, as they say, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and that's exactly what happened to him. One thing I've learned over the years is that you can't keep doing people wrong and think that you're going to get by with it. You might get away with it for a long time, but eventually all of the dirt that you do to people, all of the wrong things all the things that you should have done but you didn't do, all of that stuff is going to come back to haunt you. And he was married and he had children. What I understand and what I've heard, he also had several different baby mamas, and with children that he had out of wedlock from several women. And believe it or not, all of these women showed up out of the blue at his funeral. And that's another thing. I decided, because of although I mourn his death and I felt bad about his passing, I decided not to even bother going to his funeral, because for one thing, I didn't want to see him laying in that casket dead like that. And I knew that if I had went to his funeral, it's something that would have stayed with me for a long time. Just that imagery of seeing him dead in the casket. But then I also tend to become very down and out for a long time after going to funerals. And I didn't want to go through that. I had just went through it like a year earlier, going to his mother's funeral. And, she's another person who didn't live her life right, and eventually her lifestyle caught up with her, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I also had this fear that someone would show up at his funeral seeking revenge on his family members, so I just decided not to go. As weird as that sounds, and as superstitious and paranoid as that sounds, that's another reason why I decided not to go. But I can't say, no one that knows this man well, no one that knew him well, can honestly say to themselves that they didn't expect for him to end like that. I think in the back of our minds, we all knew that eventually someone was going to kill him because of the way that he lived his life and the way that he treated a lot of people. I mean, he had a lot of enemies out there, and it was just so bad that, even though he's someone that I grew up with and have very fond memories of, and I never had any problems with him personally. We always got along growing up, and even up until the last time I saw him, which was a year before he died. We had a pretty decent relationship. I would talk to him on social media, but I never really, the last 15 to 20 or so years of his life, I wasn't really that close to him. I didn't exchange phone numbers with him, and I would just kind of learn things about him through his family members or, friends, and through whatever he posted on social media. And he would post a lot of cryptic messages that I didn't understand, or, some other people may not have necessarily understood. But I believe that he was posting those messages for certain target individuals that knew exactly what he was saying. It's just like he was just speaking in riddles about certain things and didn't make any damn sense. The people who knew him very well, we all kept our distance from him because we knew, like I said, we all knew that his time was going to come one day, because he was such a confrontational person and had wronged so many people and had so many enemies. We knew that one day his time was going to come, and we didn't want to be around and be caught up in the crossfire, no pun intended, when his time finally came. And one thing, this is something that I forgot to mention, but about 15 years ago, someone made an attempt on his life. He was driving somewhere, and I think he was stopped in a drive-thru in a car, and these guys just pulled up on him and tried to kill him. And he was shot several times and almost died. Unfortunately, there was another person in the car with him when it happened, and thank God for that person that they weren't injured, because he happened to see the people rolling up on him and jumping out of their cars with the guns and approaching his vehicle. So he warned his passenger to get down. He tried to drive off, but it was too late. They still were able to shoot him. After that, I think he was shot about 10 times. And after that, I visited him at his grandmother's house where he was recuperating. And he was in very bad shape. I don't know what they call these things, but he had been shot up in the torso. And the doctors had to perform emergency surgery in order to save his life. So that meant they would have had to operate on his midsection. And he also had to have a tracheotomy. So he was there laying up in the bed, all bandaged up, and he had this thing, a special thing that he had to wear around his torso in order to help his midsection or torso to heal properly, and also in order to keep his intestines from falling out. That's how badly he had been shot up. He looked so frail and weak. He had lost a lot of weight, probably because he couldn't eat solid foods at that time. He also had to have an operation so that his intestines could be rerouted, and he had to have a colostomy bag. So that's how messed up he was left after being shot. But he lived to talk about it. But the thing that gets me and that disturbs me is that as he was laying up in that bed in such bad shape, close to death, we talked to him and we tried to reason with him. We all, it was me and like 5 or 6 people that drove down to visit him together. And we all reflected on life, the purpose of life, the purpose and meaning of life. We talked about how he wasn't living his purpose, probably because he didn't know what his purpose was, and that he should be thinking about getting his life together and turning away from a life of crime and embracing a more spiritual or religious lifestyle and developing better relationships with his family and friends. He said that he had thought about these things and that he really did want to turn his life around and to become a better person and a better man. But the thing that is disturbing to me is that after all that he went through, all of that suffering and near-death experience, he eventually went back to his life of crime. And a couple of years after that, he was shot up again, survived that, then went back to his life of crime again. And here we are in this present day. He was shot up a third time, and he didn't make it out of that. So, I say all of that to say this. Sometimes things happen for a reason. When you hear about someone was killed, sometimes it's isolated incidents, and sometimes the victims of these crimes are innocent. Maybe they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then there are times when the individual or the victim may have had it coming to them. And I'm not saying that to be cold-hearted, I believe in the universal law of cause and effect. There are several universal laws. You can find them if you're interested. You can find more information about the universal laws by Googling the Kybalion. The Kybalion is a work written by either an individual or a group of individuals that went up under the pseudonym of the 3 initiates. But basically, the Kybalion is supposed to be a distillation or a compendium of the works of Hermes Trismegistus. So, I'm not going to get into all of that. If you want more information, Google it, or you maybe even buy the Kybalion, which is available on Amazon.com. So, I'm a firm believer in the law of cause and effect, which is basically for every cause there's an effect, and for every effect there's a cause. I might not be reciting it exactly word for word, but that's the gist of what it is. And also, in my own colloquial terms, I'm going to even add to that by saying that, every choice that you make and every action that you take comes with either a reward or a consequence, or both. If you make poor choices in your life, then there's a great chance that you may suffer a consequence or a punishment a punishment or suffering because of your poor choice. And if you make good choices, then there's a great likelihood that you will probably reap the benefits of making good choices. But that's my interpretation of the law of cause and effect. I'm quite sure it goes a lot deeper than that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the reason why this man, who I know that I've been talking about in this video, died such an untimely and violent death, is a lot of it is because of the poor choices that he made, and all of those poor choices that he made came back to bite him, and in unexpected, probably not entirely unexpected, but I'm quite sure they caught him off guard. He wasn't expecting it at that particular moment, I'm sure. So I think I'm going to end the video here, and I'll pick up in another video. I'm out.